Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end of life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to discuss how we talk to children about grief. When a child loses someone they love, a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, it can be confusing and overwhelming. And often the adults around them are grieving too and are unsure of what to say or how to say it. My guests today are Leanne Whallett and Jess Slater, grief advocates and co authors of the children's book, All Around Is Me. Together, they bring a beautiful mix of personal experience and deep compassion to their work. And the book offers a way to help children feel seen, supported, and safe while talking about loss. We'll discuss what inspired them to write the book, how children process grief differently than adults, and what we can do to show up for the young ones in our lives who are hurting. So grab a warm drink, find a comfortable seat, and join us for the conversation. Leanne and Jess, welcome, and thank you both so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
So, first, can you start by sharing a bit about your personal journey with grief and what led you to write All Around Is Me?
My dad sadly passed away when my second daughter was 3 months old. He was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer when I had my first child, 4.5 years prior to that. And, you know, it was a really hard moment with seeing how close he was to Finley, my oldest daughter, and then seeing how much he's going to miss with this new one. It was really hard. And so, I had that loss. And then shortly after, Leanne lost her father.
Yeah, I had a slightly different experience. I mean, everybody's like grief is different, and I feel like it's like a birthing story. Everybody has a different kind of story on it. And for me, the actual my dad was sick for a couple of years too. He had encephalitis that was undiagnosed, unfortunately, which led to a series of things. But actually, on the day that we knew that he was passing, um, was the same day that COVID shut down. The whole world shut down. So it was exactly the same day. So the whole thing was just very, very surreal. I actually had just an intuition that I'm sure many people have. And I had a vision of my dad talking to me because he was in England and I live in Los Angeles. So I had a vision and he was telling me to come home. And it was the first time he'd really spoken to me. So, I mean, I'm talking spiritual now, but it was the first time I'd really heard anything from him out of all the times. But he'd been in a coma a couple of times, like 2 times in total. But I hadn't felt well, I felt a lot of things, but I hadn't felt his presence as much as this time was very evident. And he was saying, "You need to come home." So that day that I got on the plane was the same day that they'd shut the borders. So first of all, I had to go to kind of a deathbed without my support system, without my husband and children. And then secondly, I didn't know if I'd be able to get home because people were just unloading their luggage on the flight because they weren't sure what was going to happen. So the whole thing was really surreal. And obviously, I'm just the actual grief part afterwards, I would say. Like, I've known grief before. I've lost friends, grandparents I was extremely close to, but nothing could have prepared me for this. And I don't know if that was because I felt like it wasn't his time, although obviously my friends, it wasn't their time either, but maybe just his role in my life and my kids' life, like Jess is saying. It just, none of it felt right. And it was a grief like not getting out of wanting to get out of bed in the morning kind of grief. So it was kind of almost lucky in a way that it was COVID because I didn't have to leave my house because I didn't want to anyway. And the kids didn't have to go to school. So I really could hibernate. So in that way, that was like a perfect timing for me because I could just completely hide away. Um, yeah, I think nobody really talks about the trauma of the actual passing as well when they talk about grief. Unless I think you've been there at when someone does cross over, it's such a, it's such a hard experience to go through, and it can be so traumatic that is one trauma to get over. Jess and I talked about that. That's one trauma to get over. And then you have the grief on top of it. And then you have the added thing of having kids and dealing with their grief on top of it. And all of it together is a lot.
It can be really overwhelming. And we're, like I was saying, we read a lot. Both Leanne and I are big fans of books with our kids. It's a ritual we do every night. And, after her dad had passed, we were talking about this, and I had said, I tried to find some books because, my younger one, she's so young, she doesn't really understand. But my older one, she had a lot of questions. And, I was trying to find some kind of tools to help her, like, let's read about this and then we can talk about this. And
well, you got given that book, do you remember?
Yes, my friend did give me a book on grief. It was very factual. I don't want to say depressing, but it was very heavy. It was very dark. It was very heavy. There was no, optimistic, positive feeling that you got after you read it. It was like, oh, well, that just makes you feel even worse.
Yeah.
It was like a life cycle, I think, I remember.
Yeah.
We were like, what? Like they know a life cycle, it's not,
it's not comforting. So we were just, we've been friends for almost a decade now, and we were sitting at her coffee table and we were, I know.
Okay.
But so we said, we're like, we're both creative people. We have time. So we're like, why don't we just write our own book? And it was so easy and organic. Like it just the text just flowed out with no issues. And we were probably done within a few weeks with the
not
book.
even. Yeah. I mean, that was on rewrites. I mean, I do remember, however, like I lost a friend of mine when my second child was very, very little, and she was pregnant at the time. And I do remember thinking as well, I can't imagine the grief on the other side as a person who's about to die, being a mother, because that was what she was going through at that time. And I had my baby, and I just thought, it just absolutely killed me. And I thought, God, I'd want to write everything down. I'd want to, I just want to get the message across. I mean, I still say this to this day to my kids, but no matter what happens, we're together forever. It doesn't matter if I'm not here. We're just always going to be together. We're together in a different way. And that's, kind of, that's what with the message that we wanted to get across, really.
Yeah. Well, first off, your friendship comes through so much just sitting here with you. I could see it.
Okay.
Yeah. And I
can't stand her.
What a gift that you guys have, that friendship, and just sitting here seeing it is really heartwarming. And I really, it's beautiful. So thank you for sharing. That's amazing.
Thank you for saying that. It just was so strange that we'd both gone through something so huge within a very short space of time. That was really crazy to me.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the book. Who's this book for? And for those, it's on Amazon. I have a copy of it, and it is amazing for people who are listening or viewing this, and people who are viewing it, watching this video. I'll just share a couple pages. It is stunningly beautiful. When I first opened it, it took my breath away. The beauty and the calmness, it just made me feel really uplifted and really beautiful. And I'm curious because in every single one of the pages, and I told them before this interview, every single time I open to a page or I start reading it, because I've read it more than once, obviously, I noticed something different. And when I did go through this originally, I noticed on every single page you do have a butterfly, but it's like a shadow, a white shadow of a butterfly. It's a light butterfly, a light being, I would say. Can you just tell me a little bit about that choice? Because I know you illustrated this also, Jess.
Yeah, well, so again, part of it was, you know, just the ability for the kids to notice little things like that. Like my older daughter did a reading at her, younger sister's kindergarten class, and she chose this book. And one of the little girls in her class, when they did questions after, she said, I noticed that every page has a little butterfly. And it's like those little things, but also it's mostly symbolic too. So for two different reasons, like, we were talking about what signs that we see, like, again, my 5-year-old who doesn't really have cognitive memory of my dad. But we talk about him all the time. Anytime we see a hummingbird fly up and stop and look at us, or, a butterfly flying by, or a rainbow when we're driving around, like we look for all these signs, and even she says, oh, look, there's Najee, saying hi. It's just that type of thing. So the butterfly was really symbolic of that. It's also symbolic for just the change in life. Like there's one page that talks about how a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. And that's really something that they can use as an analogy. Like, I'm still here, I'm just in a different form, and now I'm free and taking flight. And then the third one is, we talked about doing an orb. Like we've had a lot of stories shared by other people that we've spoken to about signs that they see. And an orb is usually one that they say, like, oh, I saw this glowing orb. But visually, it was really hard to capture that, like, without it just looking like kind of a glowing ball. And so I was like, I'll make the butterfly glow. So then it's like,
And I think the thing is, what I liked about it was the fact that you don't always notice, you might not always notice that kind of light is right above you or right all around you, So, yeah.
How did you approach talking about grief in the book in a way that felt safe for children? Because it's a children's book, and so you talked about before going through the experience for yourself of losing your parents.
Like we didn't write the book going in thinking, okay, grief, how do we explain losing somebody, like how do we explain how you feel in grief? I think it was more like I wanted to write, I don't know about Jess, but a message that if I had passed, what would I want to say to my children? What would dad want to say to the kids? And that's the mind. And so, because that was the mindset, it was so easy, because it was just like, even though I'm not physically here, I am all around you. I will never leave you. I, look for signs for me, because I'm right here. I'm right next to you. I'm not in physical form, but I'm all around. I'm going to be your lucky charm from now on. I'm your angel looking after you. I'm just in a different realm or whatever, because everybody's viewpoints or everybody's opinions on it all are very different. But we wanted, with children, with the kids, we wanted them to feel some kind of comfort, and not a dead stop of just like, well, they're not here anymore, so life goes on. It was like, no, let's kind of create something whereby, yes, he's physically gone, but maybe he is here, maybe he did just put that song on the radio for you. And I feel like that brings me comfort. So that brings them massive comfort, I found.
I think so. And I also think that it's important to realize that anyone who has a child that's dealing with grief will probably recognize the fact that kids, they grieve in kind of ebbs and flows. Like they can be completely unbothered and seem like everything's fine and dandy. And then they can also be really heavy and sad and frustrated and confused. And so in the book, although we try to keep a really consistent, uplifting, comforting vein, we also acknowledge their feelings. Like there's pages where it's like, it talks about, it's okay to feel sad. Like you will feel sad some days, but, don't let that hold you down, or celebrate the memories and the happy moments too. Like when you're, listening to music that we used to listen to, like remember those happy times. So it's touching on all the different feelings that they'll have and acknowledging them and basically giving them approval to be like, you should have all these feelings. That's normal. And then try to figure out a way to navigate through and come out in a positive way at the other end.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say positive around such a big topic like this, but really, the thing is that things will get better. There are stages of grief. Not to say that it's going to, I don't mean that better, but I remember on the first anniversary thinking, okay, it's not every single morning now that I don't want to wake up, not that I don't want to get out of bed. Sorry, not wake up, that I don't want to get out of bed. It's maybe once a month, or, basically the time stretched in between that grief gets longer. And then you go straight back in and you're right in, and it's really horrendous and heavy and it's like it just happened. But there is some space of stretch of time in between that. And I think with the kids, it's kind of reassuring them that they're not going to, that like horrendous feeling they're feeling, that deep sadness isn't going to be like that 24/7 for the rest of their days. They're going to find happy moments. They're going to get better. They're going to feel better. And, I think that's really important to kind of say to them, because things can be really scary when you're in an emotion as a child. I think, you think it's going to last forever. I'm just going to feel like this and it's too much. It's too overwhelming. But you know what? Tomorrow you might feel just a little bit better, So.
Yeah, and I think that's spot on, where you talk about going in and out of, both of you just talked about going in and out of grief. And I think people, adults also, but they think that we go through these stages and then it's over. And it's not linear. It's like a bowl of spaghetti. It's like a piece of spaghetti. You're all over the place and you're going to go back. You're going to take those dips. And that's true for children. It's true for adults. But the way that I think children take and experience grief is they feel grief and then they come back to center. And then they're like, they're playing, and you might think that they're okay, but that's the way they self-regulate. They do it naturally. That's the way that we as humans do it naturally, except as adults, we try to control it too much. So we don't go through and they're much more natural. This is the way that grief is experienced from a human perspective, and they just let it happen. So we can learn a lot from them and their grief, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And I love, Leanne, that you talk about having that relationship with the person that died, the person that passed away, continuing that relationship. It is just different. And that is, as I said, spot on. There's still a relationship that happens. They're still in your life.
And I think honestly, like that does take the adult to instigate, because for instance, I mean, if I didn't mention my dad all the time, yes, they would mention, yes, they would remember, but not probably as much as I'm prompting. I mean, I do prompt a lot, well, you got that test today, I bet Granddad is so, I mean, and for me, I have to talk because that's his memory. That's I want him around in all the things when she graduates from 5th grade and, and he's not there because you're grieving also the loss of anything that's future or anything that they should be a part of that they're not, which sucks within itself. I want him there then. So then I do want to bring that to my kids, and, but not in a heavy way. Oh, I wish Dad was here. Don't you? It's more like, oh my gosh, if he saw you in that dress right now, I wonder what you would say, but or did you just see that? he's here as well. I knew it. I mean, unless we're prompting those those more like not happy things, but the lightness of it, of, rather than being, I wish, why isn't he here? And I think it's better to have more of a good positive of, well, let's do his favorite song all the way here, because, rather than,
And
because you're feeling that inside, you're feeling that heartache of, she's graduating, or whatever it is, it's the 10th birthday, or, they just won the basketball, and you're thinking, God, he should be here, sitting here watching this. And it's torture in your head, but for them, you want to protect them, because they do naturally feel that too, but you don't want to take that away from the moment that they're in. So yeah, I think rather than not talking about it, it's better I try and bring them up as much as I can, because without that,
without it, they've lost a part of their history also. And I know both of you talked about grandparents briefly, about having grandparents, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I know I had a very close relationship with my grandparents. Your fathers died really young. And so just providing them with that grandparent experience, that grandfather experience in any, in a different sort of way, but that's important to their history also.
Oh, absolutely. True.
So I know that most people don't want to talk about their loved ones or talk about griefs. Most adults don't want to talk about it with their children because they feel like they're protecting their children. But children are, they're really perceptive. They know something is wrong. If they knew the adult or they knew the person that has died, they're feeling sadness and loss. Okay. When I've spoken to one adult spoke to said, yeah, I was not grieving in front of my child. And then my child came to me and said, Mom, I'm feeling really sad. And I see that no one else is feeling this way. Is there something wrong with me?
Wow.
So what do you wish that more adults understood about how children grieve and how to handle that?
I mean, I think it's going to be different for every scenario, but I think overall, I think a lot of people, like I personally, I tend to hold a lot of emotions in. And so when my dad was going through everything, I was really just like, let's just stay focused, get what needs to get done. And then when he passed, it really hit me hard. And then when it came time to the funeral, because everything happened really quickly, because he was converted to the Islamic religion. And so in their culture, you have to go in the ground, like literally the next day. Yep. And so there wasn't a lot of time for me to really process everything. And, my daughter was there at the funeral, and it was probably the first time in her life that she ever saw me cry. And I felt guilty, because I was like, it's okay to show emotions. Like it's hard because you don't want to freak your kids out, so you don't want to be like hyperventilating, sobbing where you can't breathe, because you're so consumed with all the feelings. But you can show your emotions too. And I think also just talking about it, even if you're not an emotional person or you're an overly emotional person, as long as you keep the conversation open and, allow your kid to be interacting with the conversation, I think that's the key point. It's like, you can process it however you need to, but just letting them know whatever they're feeling, totally normal, and have conversations about it to work through it, so that they don't feel like they're on an island and they're, confused about what's going on in their minds.
Yeah, I think we have a similar viewpoint on that. I mean, I'm slightly more emotional than Jess, not that much, but I think the biggest parent instinct, especially mom instinct, is just to constantly shield your children, protect your child. You know, you don't want them to feel the things ever. If it's anything negative, you know, anger, sadness, depression, anxiety, quick fix, quick. You don't want your kid to feel it. You know, that's just a natural instinct as a mother. But you can't take it away. And so there's nothing you can do about it. It's happened and they're going to feel it. And so it's almost like giving in to the fact that you can't fix this, you can't change it, you can't change how they're going to feel about it. Trying to grieve with them around is a blessing and a curse, because I was chatting to my sister about this, who didn't have children at the time, and she was able to sit in it. She was able to sit every day in that darkness. I couldn't, because I had 2 kids that didn't even go to school at that time. So I had to get up every day, because ultimately the kids need to know that everything's going to be okay. And you're that one rock person who is, you know, supposed to give them that. So there was that challenge for sure, because at some stages I thought, I can't grieve properly because I have 2 kids in the house. I can't wait, or I can't do those things, you know, that I should be doing right now, or that I want to. But at the same time, it was a blessing, because it made me get up every morning. It gave me, you know, that purpose every single day to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. So there was that. But me personally, I did cry. And sometimes even now I'm like, I'm just feeling sad. Like, you know, they're like, "Mommy, what's wrong?" I just feel sad. I just miss Granddad, you know. But I remember there was one time, like Jess is saying, you don't want to be wailing all over the place. But I do remember one day specifically where I think everyone was in the garden, and I just went upstairs and I kind of locked myself in the closet and just lost it. And my eldest, she said at bedtime, you know, I heard you. And I'm like, okay. But I think the thing is like, but I was able to then go in and put her to bed. And it's like, I think if you're just like in the mess, and you have, I think it's better to, if you can, come back around to, yeah, and I did that and I released it, but now we're good. You know, now I'm okay. And then tomorrow it might come again, but it will always be okay. You know, I am going to get to a point where I'm going to be okay. And it, you know, I think if you're just in it all the time, they're just going to feel really, really scared. And that's what they feel when they see you really that vulnerable, is they feel scared, you know. But I think so long as you reassure them that it's still going to be okay, and that, you know, you're still able to protect them, even though you're feeling these things, then that's how I just done it.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
And
know
there
if
is
that's right.
there is a difference between people who have children in the home as far as how they're able to grieve. About 80% of my practice is working with people who are in the grieving stage. And I work with a lot of spouses who've lost their loved one. And so part of what I do is not only the grief work, but I go to their home and I do practical work. So we might clean out the person's closet, the spouse's closet that's passed away, or do other work with them.
Gift.
And I notice that people who've lost spouses, they go through something, you know, some people have coined it widow brain or widower brain, where there is definitely a fog and it lasts for years. And so I have to, you know, I look, and they might not, when I'm over, they might not have food in their fridge. And so I have to make sure they have food, and that they're going shopping, and that they're paying their bills. But people who have children, that no matter what age the children are, the children could be teenagers. They understand, they always have food. They always, like, it is a very different, process.
It's just a subconscious thing, I think, that you know, you have to, you just got to power through.
Yep.
Yeah. You still
keep
have
the
to
ship
get along.
afloat, even though you're dealing with your own stuff.
Exactly.
But you
Exactly.
still do have to deal with your own stuff. And that's the thing, because, I can see it being very easy for people to use that as sort of not an excuse, but, a very good way to compartmentalize and be like, well, I can't grieve right now because I just have to be a mom, and there is a balance, because that's a massive danger in itself. And yeah, you can't do that either. It's good because it's going to hit you at some point. There's no escaping it. It doesn't matter if you try and put it off for a year, 2 years. I mean, I just had my dad's 5-year anniversary, and I thought, okay, I'm not going to be that bad. It's 5 years. This Christmas was the first year I felt like, okay, I think I can be happy, and 5-year anniversary, and I was an absolute wreck for weeks, and where did that come from? I have no idea. It doesn't matter where you push it off to, or if you think, well, I'll deal with that later, it will just get you.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable.
So in order to take care of your children too, make sure they're grieving, you have to take care of yourself, which is in our society, we just don't do, period. We talked about the common experience of kids taking and what you guys have experienced, what both of you with your children were. They grieved and then they came back and they were playing and they seemed okay. Is there anything else in your experience that you saw with when your children were grieving, or because I know you talk to other parents about this, is there any other common ways that children express grief that you could
I
tell?
mean, there's all kinds of ways. I think it depends on how severe it impacts the kids. But, personally for me, mine were kind of mild. And I think it's because we kind of dealt with it head on, and it like didn't allow things to just blow over. But, kids can have behavioral issues. They can regress and get really clingy, which is normal too, because I think when they lose someone close to them, it makes you aware of the potential mortality of everyone you love. So it's like, not necessarily, I don't think they view it as themselves. Maybe they do. Mine were like, well, can you die? Can daddy die? Like it's a lot of that confusion. Some kids, it affects them mentally, kind of like what you were saying, the widow fog. Sometimes they can have that brain fog. It can affect their academics in school. There's a lot of different ways kids can show signs that they're struggling. Personally, for me, it was, we didn't have that much. We just had a little bit of clinginess. We had a little bit of anxiety or concern, but we chatted about it. And then we just, I'm lucky. I didn't have a lot of those,
Yeah, I think, sorry.
Can I ask, how old were your children when your fathers passed away, and how old are they now? Or is that okay to discuss that? Okay.
When my father passed away, my oldest was 4.5 and my youngest was 3 months old. And now they're 10 and almost 6.
Yeah, mine were 7 and 5, and now are 10 and nearly 13 plus.
And the reason why I ask is, do you find that you revisit this and you revisit the grief with them, but the way that you talk about it now is different at every stage, and then the way they process it is different? And kind of what does that look like, and how do you handle that?
I feel like it's hard to gauge. I mean, we had different ages. Like her kids are older, but for us, like obviously you do feel sad. We talk about missed things like, oh, I wish Naji was here to see this or whatever it is. But we also do things to just remember him in a positive way. Like we have in our hallway a row of framed photographs, and one of them is my dad and me on my wedding day. And every year, it's funny because if anyone touches it, it's like a flood of papers. But every year on the anniversary of his death, Finley will write a little letter and draw a picture and slide it behind the frame. It's just like, and it's on her own. Like I didn't
prompt it.
Yeah, I didn't prompt it. I mean, I did say like the first year, because that's one of the things we do every year to remember him, is we talk about him. We talk about him all the time, but we specifically make an effort to remember like our favorite memories of him. sometimes we'll make his favorite like food. He always, we laugh about it, but he always like danced and pointed his finger. So we like have a little dance party. Like it's just goofy stuff like that, you know? So for us, I think it's time passed where it eases the pain and they're also older, but also I feel like the grief has kind of transformed, mostly for my kids, into a positive thing. Like instead of it being heavy, they focus on all the happy memories or the happy stories, or, you know, it's like this, it's an uplifting thing as opposed to the heaviness. I think if anyone has the heaviness, it's me, because, you know, I have, you know, it's my whole life. I'm an adult. I have a lot more history and a lot more memories, and just sadness that he's not here to see these grandkids grow up and to be these amazing, you know, little ladies. But
I think for me, age-wise, it's kind of similar. Yeah, I feel like the things I did then are similar to the things I do now. I mean, I know certain things you're going to do with your kids, grief-wise, age appropriateness of chatting about certain things. But honestly, the way that I tackled it then is the same now, honestly. We had, with regards to kind of how you can see it in kids, I mean, every child is different, and like Jess, you know, said, there's so many ways that they can act out. I think anything that's behave like that it seems different is bound to be that, even if it's something you would never have thought about, even if it's just being shy about, you know, it could be any difference. But and also processing kids different processes. You know, my youngest didn't process it the same. She, you know, when I told them over FaceTime what had happened, my eldest was instantly bawling and just a wreck, and my younger one was like, well, I'm going to have to take his name out of my contacts, is what he said, what she said to me. And I was like, what?
I still have mine saved in my contacts.
Of course. But she was just, she didn't say, she says now she didn't get it, you know, and it took her at least a week for it to be like, hi, you mean he's not coming back, you know? And then it was the locket and the things, and then all the things that she needed. But my eldest is very, very emotional, and I've felt like she dealt with it great, because she is emotional and she always released everything. But obviously I said it was during COVID, and then we started to have some major anxiety separation issues. Horrendous.
It was very debilitating. It was hard for them.
It was very, very, very bad. And we had school refusal. We had a whole situation with everything. And not one time did I think, oh, you know, maybe it's about dad passing away 2 years ago, because this is like a few years on. But having had therapy and everything else, because yes, everyone's blaming everything on COVID, but actually the deep rootedness in her mass anxiety and separation anxiety for me, which was not age appropriate at all, was she thought I was going to die. And that was just down to, you know, her experience of my dad, was the fact that she wasn't there when he died. So she thought that if I was out of sight, whether that was just, you know, dropping her at school and going to the market, whatever, that I could die. And so it's taken her years to kind of come through that. It affected her really, really, really badly in that way.
Thank you for sharing that, because both of you, because I think that, you know, we don't talk about grief. We don't talk about grief in children, obviously. And I think that parents are just trying to figure this out with absolute, you know, we're just all trying to figure this out. But parents, they're like flailing in the ocean, right? We don't have enough knowledge. We don't talk about this enough. So this is a new experience for everyone. And for parents, it is really difficult. And this book, I just want to ask, how can parents and teachers and even doulas, so someone like me who works with, you know, who works with children, or works with families, I should say, in grief, how do you see using this book to start conversations with children about their loss? How can this help?
I think it's, I mean, it's a conversation starter, which is key. It's that open chain of communication where they feel safe and seen and heard. And then I think it's, like we put stuff in that, we have talked about, like different signs or different memories or different things that we thought about with our own personal things. But then after that, you can allow the kid to make their own personal connections. Like, what do you think about, or what memories do you have, or when you see this, or what do you see that makes you think of whoever they've lost? It just allows them to connect personally to their own grief, but in a positive way, where it's like, yes, you feel sadness, you can feel frustration, hurt, but like, let's give you tools to be able to connect to happy moments where you can try to focus on the positive side of it. Obviously no one wants to lose somebody they love, but when it happens, how can you connect to these things you see, or memories, or different things to make you put it in a positive, comforting, happy moment? Like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm sad they're not here, but I remember when we did this together and that made me so happy, and I love that. And let's try to make that but they have to do their own personal things, and it might take time to work through it, but this at least gets that conversation started where you can read this. It's kind of like,
it's comforting.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. Like, when I read it to the kids, it's a comfort. The biggest tragic part of it is that they're not here anymore. And then our book says, well, yeah, they are. They are. So they're all around. So I think it just gives them that comfort of like, oh, like, thank goodness, like, they are watching me. They are all around me. They are in everything I do. They did see me run that race. They did cheer me on, just in a different way, and I think that's so comforting, because that kind of cut off is this, it's so hard for them.
Yeah. Well, last question, because I know we're almost at the top of the hour. What advice would you give to someone who feels afraid or unsure of how to talk to their grieving children, especially when, like you, they were grieving also? Is there one thing that you could recommend?
I think just to be honest, and to not be afraid of it. And, if you can be honest with your kids, that's, the best thing that you can do. You're giving them, I look at it this way. It's, you're giving them a resilience, and the pain that they're going through, which I never wanted my kids to feel this. I didn't have deep grief until I was in my 20s, and then obviously in my 40s now. I don't want them to experience this when they're at elementary school. That sucks. I hated that for them. But like we said before, it's unavoidable. And I think we just have to be honest with them. And
I think it's also to remember, it's not one conversation that like, let's talk about how you're feeling. It's just, just being there and making sure that they know, you don't have to ask, how are you feeling today? Are you feeling sad? It's just maybe like Leanne does, you make a mention of like, oh, if granddad was here, he would love to see you in that dress. And then, you could say, because it's honest and true, I really miss him, and then maybe that allows them and opens up an opportunity for them to share their feelings. So it's just making sure that they know it's okay to talk about how they feel, but not in a like pressured way, just to keep that communication, and also just keep the memories alive. Like, that keeps the topic on the table, with you constantly putting that in their world.
And I think ultimately, like, all kids want is to feel safe. And I think if you say, it's okay that it's that you're not okay, and we're going to be okay. We are going to get through this. The reassurance, because you are, life, I hate that term, but life does go on, but you will be okay. We will get through it. we're feeling crappy right now and we're all sad and but we're all going to be okay, you know. And I think that that's all that they need is like, okay, good, you know, like we are going to be okay. And you know what? It's not fair. Like life is, you know, it sucks for us that we have
don't want
experience
to have that message. So.
Okay. It's not fair. It's not fair.
No.
It is not fair. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, but we're still going to be okay. And we're still going to, you know, I mean, these are only our points of view. So she does everything different to me. So
for the yin and yang.
That's wonderful. So I wanted to thank both of you for being here today. I really appreciate it, and for being so open and vulnerable. Thank you. For those who would like to learn more about you and get a copy of your fantastic book, how can they?
We're on Amazon. You can just type in either her name, my name, or the title of the book, All Around Is Me. We're also on Barnes & Noble. And we also have a website. We have our own publishing company. It's motherduckpublishing.com. So that has a little bit more of the background, of the inspiration of the story, a little bit more about us, and then also links to purchase too.
And we are going to be setting up a GoFundMe. No, I did cut that bit out. We are going to be setting up a Kickstarter campaign just to raise some funds for our kind of marketing to try and get out and spread the word a little more, because we feel like this could really help kids all over, you know, in counseling offices, in schools, in hospitals, and we really want to try and get it out there. So we'll let you know once we've done that too.
And once you have that, if you have that set up within the next, few weeks, please give me a link to that, and I'll put it in the descriptions, and I'll put the link to the book and your website in the description also, so viewers and listeners can get to it very easily. And listeners, if you please go and purchase a book. It is, as I said, beautiful. It's an amazing story. And also, if you can, go your library. Libraries will actually take, and if they don't have this, they will take requests and they will purchase books on your behalf. So everyone just call your library, go on their website. They usually forms, and get it in libraries so that everyone could read it or have access to it.
Thank you.
So everyone, listeners, when we ignore the conversation about grief, it doesn't protect children. It can actually confuse them. They know when something big has happened, they feel the loss. And when the people around them stay silent or try to hide their emotions, it can make them feel like they're alone in what they're experiencing. We don't need to have all of the right answers. What matters most is creating space for their feelings, showing them it's okay to be sad, and letting them know that they're not alone. When we make it safe to talk about grief, we help them begin to heal. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care